Hey my good friend, Sam Haymart with Test Driven TV. Today for your viewing pleasure we have the Toyota Corolla Cross, an all-new crossover SUV based on the very popular and long-standing Corolla sedan and hatch. So I'm going to show it to you inside and out. We're going to take it for a test drive and then I'm going to tell you what I really think. Before we get out on the test drive, we're going to do a quick walk around, and it's 111 degrees today, so believe me, I'm going to keep it quick. This is the Toyota Corolla Cross for 2022. Now this is based on the Corolla hatch with its 103.9-inch wheelbase, so its footprint is identical to the Corolla hatch. In fact, this is essentially a taller version of the hatch with a little bit more of a utilitarian SUV style. It is, of course, all new in styling. You're not going to look at this and see any trim or pieces that are shared with the Corolla sedan or the hatch. This is an XLE all-wheel drive model. As tested, our price is $33,000 or just a little bit under. This is about the most you're going to be able to spend with the XLE all-wheel drive, and this has got a number of options on it that bring it up to that point. This starts out down at $22,000 and some change for the front-wheel drive base model. Looking at the styling, it is very much more like a Toyota SUV than a sedan or a hatch. It's definitely got the more truck, upright, tougher look to it. This has the optional self-leveling LED headlights on it. There's fog lights down below. And coming around the corner on the XLE, this has 18-inch alloy wheels. You can see a generous level of plastic cladding on the wheel arches and the lower rockers. At the rear, there's kind of an interesting little dogleg detail there I thought was interesting. And coming up to the roof line, a nice piece of chrome that comes all the way back, and it says Corolla Cross right here at the D-pillar. Sort of a nice little detail. A built-in spoiler at the rear hatch, LED taillights back here, again with a nice little Corolla Cross detail close up in the lens. Even though it is a small crossover, this does have a power hatch, which is operable in a number of ways. Nice feature as always, no matter how big or small the vehicle is, because if you've got an armful of groceries, it's nice to just press a button and have that thing open. If you sat in the interior of a Corolla of late, you're going to find this very familiar because it's identical to the hatch as well as the sedan. Give or take a few little details, you got the same dash, all the equipment is virtually the same. And in this particular car, this has a fully black interior, and because we are on the XLE trim, this does have the Softex seats. Now Softex is vinyl, it looks like leather. It sort of feels like leather, but it is vinyl. The driver's seat has a power seat, passenger seat has a manual seat. Now I found that these seats are for the most part comfortable, though when you sit in them for a long time for some reason, whether it be their firmness or their support, I found that after driving for an hour or so, unlike a lot of cars, I was ready to get out of these. I was just like, I want to get out. The steering wheel is leather wrapped and has controls on it for both the instrument cluster and the audio system. In front of me is an instrument cluster that has a 7-inch digital screen that's customizable in the center, and on the outboard, analog gauges. The center stack has an 8-inch screen at the top, controls for the HVAC here, and down below is the switches for the heated seats on this particular model. A little cubby down here for your phone, and this one does have a wireless charger on it, and then the center console. This does have a traditional gear selector, my favorite, and behind that, the parking brake controls, cup holders. You can put nice tall cups here, not going to be in your way. Inside the center console here, storage, not very much. There's not quite enough room for a square tissue box. That's the best way I can describe it. The rear seat of the Corolla Cross is actually a little bit more comfortable than I expected for a vehicle in this size category. These seats are set for my height, about 5'8" with my tennis shoes on. I've got about 2 inches of legroom ahead of me, and I've got a lot of headroom. This has got sort of an area that pops up above my head. I could probably wear a cowboy hat and I'd be okay back here. The seating height is pretty good, and this seat has some decent bolstering on the sides to hold me in place. Now this does seat 3 across, though the center seat would definitely be for smaller people. Amenities back here, I do have vents in the back, which is great when it's 110 degrees. And below that, 2 USB ports for charging my things. Here, as expected with most cars, a fold-down armrest with cup holders. The seat does fold down in a 60-40 split, as you'd expect, and there's actually a pretty good flat load floor back here once you get these seats down. And underneath the floor, a spare tire. Very important with an SUV that you're going to be taking out in the wild, where you could cut a tire open and there might not be cell service. The switchgear generally is of a pretty good quality, but one thing I did notice is that I don't know if it's because the vehicle's built at the Alabama plant, but the quality of some of the fit and finish here on the interior, I've noticed, just isn't quite as good. The stitch work and the trim and the way things are put together, a little bit sloppy in a couple places. So when it comes to rating this interior, it gets 4 out of 5 stars. When it comes to the infotainment and user interface, this has an 8-inch touchscreen mounted high at the top of the dash. It makes it easy to see, easy to reach, and this has the optional $1,500 JBL top-end option when it comes to the audio system here. It has 9 speakers, there's extra tweeters on the A-pillars, there's a woofer at the back, and looking at the touchscreen, this has hard controls on both sides, volume knob, tuning knob, I love that, buttons for all your major use controls. Now using this system, the menu systems on this are for the most part easy to understand, and it does home screen every time you start the car, so it doesn't stay where you left it. But really the big disappointment in this system for me is the fact that for $1,500, all the money spent, the JBL sound system doesn't really sound that good. The sound quality just isn't there. Also, the screen and some of the feature content here just isn't what some of the other brands are offering at this price grade. Kia, Hyundai, they offer everything. If I press the map button, for instance, I find out that that's an extra. Navigation's not installed here. So there are things that you have to spend money for with Toyota, and there are subscriptions you have to pay for with Toyota that some of the other brands don't make you do. So when it comes to feature content, I don't think we're really talking about value here. So when I look at this infotainment system, I've got glare on the screen that makes it hard to see. I'm losing some features compared to the competition, and the sound quality not that good for all of this money spent. This infotainment system gets 3 out of 5 stars. All right, my friends, let's go for a drive. That's what we're all here for, right? So the Toyota Corolla has been a vehicle that on the new TNGA chassis platform architecture has been a big improvement over previous generations in being a little bit more lively, having a more refined handling experience, etc. And this being based on the Toyota Corolla hatch, I expected that we would have a very similar driving experience, and for the most part, we do. This has a McPherson strut front suspension, and with the all-wheel drive model, a fully independent rear suspension. Now, if you go with the two-wheel drive, front-wheel drive model, it does have a torsion beam rear suspension, a little bit simpler of a setup. Driving down the road, the first thing I'm noticing, though, is the fact that this has sort of an old-fashioned classic Toyota suspension tuning, which is to say, it's got a little bit of a floaty bobbing ride, and I'm finding that in curves like I'm in right now, I need to sort of correct for the steering. It's not tracking down the road with a level of sharpness and finesse that some higher end vehicles, and honestly a lot of other Toyotas that I've tested in the last few years do. This one seems to have a bit of a bobbing, bouncy ride and a little bit of a wanderlust out here. I will say that it has a quiet ride. On our 70-mile-an-hour freeway test, this came in at 63.6 decibels, which is about average, maybe a little bit lower than the average, but doing pretty good in terms of road noise. And actually wind noise was the thing that caught my attention the most. Around town, over speed humps and speed bumps, things like that, driveways, this has a nice solid feel. There's no noises from the suspension or anything that would indicate that this is built anything less than pretty solid. But like any small SUV, I really want to find out how it performs off the pavement. The Desert Washboard Road is a good place to get a taste of how well put together this vehicle is and how well they've extended the ride and the handling characteristics that we have on the pavement into the rough. And even though this isn't hardcore off-roading, it's just a good way to see if this is really as capable as they're telling us it is. It's supposed to be an SUV, right? And what I'm finding out here is that this has a nice solid body structure, and the suspension and the steering gives you a pretty confident handling feel out here. Now on these gravel corners, this does have a stability control that I can feel acting on me already. This thing tends to be pretty easily thrown around and easily triggers the traction control and the stability control to step in and adjust pitch and yaw. I do find that suspension bottoms out pretty quickly, so there's not a lot of suspension travel here. This doesn't have the kind of travel you might expect with a more off-road oriented vehicle. This has got street suspension but lifted, so that means that if you go too fast over rough stuff, you're going to feel that suspension bottoming out. So I think my take on the ride and driving and handling experience on the pavement and off is that this is adequate. It's good enough to get you there, and it's not an uncomfortable ride, but it's not the kind of ride and handling experience that is above average. It's average. This chassis gets 4 out of 5 stars. Coming to a stop, this does have an auto start-stop system for the engine idle. When you come to a stop, typically speaking, the engine comes to a stop, and then when you let off the throttle to take off again, the engine starts. Now in this case, and most of the week that I've had this vehicle, it doesn't, because it's very hot, the air conditioner's on, and most of these are programmed such that it doesn't turn the engine off if the air conditioner's running, because the engine powers the air conditioner. But the question I always like to ask whenever I test a car, and most of you come here to watch, is how does it go? So let me come to a complete stop. I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. There's no one around. Okay, and go. Leisurely, relaxing, except for that noise, and 60. I don't know if any of you are timing out there. Acceleration is what I would call placid, relaxing, not jarring at all. 169 horsepower, 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. This comes with a CVT, not my favorite transmission in the world, but it is the better of the 2 CVTs that is offered in the Corolla lineup. Same as you're going to find on the top end Corolla hatch. It has a traditional first gear that it shifts out of into the CVT mode, which gives you a little bit more of a traditional feel at low speeds and off the line. After that, it can give you simulated shifts, which it does sometimes, and other times it doesn't. So at the end of the day, you still have a CVT, and it's not one of the better ones on the market. I found that it just, around town, it feels like I've got a rubber band holding me back. And when you add to the fact that this is a pretty heavy vehicle with this level of power, 169 horsepower sounds pretty good, but the way it's delivered through this CVT, not so great. Now, fuel economy, this is rated at 29 city, 32 highway, and 30 MPG combined. In my week with it, however, I got about 23. Not so impressive. And 23 from 30, that's a pretty big gap. And in fairness, air conditioning's on all the time, but still, pretty big gap. So all in, this is a powertrain that when I look at it, I sort of think about what's available for most of the competitors. Most of the competitors put you with a CVT, but some of theirs are just a little bit better than this, and some of those vehicles feel a little bit more peppy and certainly get better fuel economy. So this powertrain gets 3 out of 5 stars. Now, it's time to talk about value. And this is really a nice entry in the segment because Toyota really has not had a compact crossover SUV smaller than the RAV4 in a long time. And you might be able to say the CHR sort of fits that build, but with its coupe roofline, it's really more of a tall car. This has true SUV capability with its tall rear cargo space and more upright format. So when you look at the competition, there are quite a few things out there. Honda's there, Kia's there, Hyundai's there, Nissan. But this is a vehicle that has the solid Corolla pedigree, and it has the solid Corolla image to go with its newfound SUV utility. And really, for a lot of people out there that have missed the Toyota Corolla Matrix, this is essentially a replacement. And when the hybrid comes along for the 2023 model year, you could almost look for this as a replacement for the Prius V that no longer exists. This will have a hybrid version that we don't have all the details on yet, but should be right around $2,000 to $3,000 more. Now, at this price for this vehicle, $32,000, almost $33,000. Wow, that is a lot of money. It is almost virtually the most you can spend on this. This starts out at $22,000 and some change. And honestly, my take on this is a vehicle that is most competitive and has the most value at its lower trim grades, where you are very price competitive with a lot of that which you can compare this to. At $32,000, $33,000, honestly, I think there's a lot of other choices out there that are better, more exciting, more engaging, and maybe more stylistic. This is, by comparison in some ways, and this is gonna sound like a slap, but it's kind of an appliance. It's like buying a washing machine or a dryer compared to some of the other options out there at this price. But down at the lower end, I just think it makes more sense, in my opinion. So that said, when I look at value, I put quality, I put all of the parts and pieces of our test drive in there. Warranty coverage, not the best in the business. Toyota typically doesn't have the longest warranties that you can get out there among the competition. So I put value at 4 out of 5 stars. When you put that in with everything we've already talked about, we're at 3.5 stars for the review. So there you go. Please follow us on social media. You can see that down there. There's a lot of stuff that we do that we don't put video out on, and that's going to be seen on our social media. You can see our latest video right there. Better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel right down there. Either way, stay tuned.